I'm very happy to welcome another young Indian to this channel, part of the Voice of the Young series. Hello, everybody. Today we have with us Aditya Jain. Let's listen to him. Over to you, Aditya.
So hi everyone. First of all, thank you to Subodh Sir for having me here and recognizing the potential of younger generations. Now, a brief introduction about me. I am Aditya. My work revolves around law, finance, and technology, and I am a research scholar and a law student. And I think the one thing that I truly would want to espouse is one, making academic research truly democratic so that it's accessible, and secondly, fostering interdisciplinary education among students. So, as a law student, I was consciously precluded from institutions from, let's say, participating in discourses surrounding economics or technology because I'm told I'm a law student. So, therefore, you ought to only practice the law and espouse the law, and that's where your expertise remains. You're not allowed to venture beyond the law. Or rather, that's not encouraged, or people tend to have barriers to themselves that I may not be able to understand economics or understand technology, but what I fundamentally believe is every single idea in this world, every single concept in this world is ultimately a bunch of scattered arguments, a bunch of scattered concepts. So economics is a bunch of scattered arguments and a bunch of scattered concepts. So is artificial intelligence. So is machine learning. So is philosophy or literature. It's all a bunch of scattered arguments. So therefore, if you start to inquire within those arguments and sort of you can understand that and not only understand that but also produce scholarship within that area. So that's where my work revolves around. I work within the intersection of law, finance, and technology, and I combine multiple disciplines such as literature and economics, and then produce scholarship that acknowledges the interactions of all of these fields together. I also do a lot of public policy work in terms of uh, within the intersection of law and technology. I've worked with organizations such as the Dialogue with the Center for Legal Policy. I additionally practice a lot of fintech law. I write a lot. I don't want to toot my own horn, but I have won a couple of research competitions. So it's fair to say I understand how research pedagogy and research scholarship works. What I am striving towards and I hope to create is a community of young scholars across India who come from regional colleges who perhaps don't have as many resources as somebody who comes from a private college would have. And then perhaps tell them how they can find these resources, how research methodologies work, how they can sort of accommodate interdisciplinary research within their work, and then perhaps produce scholarship that is
Mhm.
uh, ingenuous, that is interesting, that is well researched. So that is what my work entails in broad 2 minutes.
Okay. Well, you have come to this stage which is somewhat unconventional, as you are yourself saying. So tell us how you came here.
Oh, so it's the journey is quite anticlimactic, if I may. I was a extremely regular high school student, and I was very reserved in my own box, as a lot of high school students are, because I came from a fairly small town. It's the city of Agra in Uttar Pradesh.
Hey,
So
don't call it small.
it's fairly small compared to Mumbai and Delhi.
Agra is on the world map.
It's on the world map. It's on the
I-
world map, but yeah, it's a great city though. I love the city. However, in terms of opportunities, in terms of, let's say, national level debating, good MUNs or research competitions, essay competitions, wasn't exposed to those very much, or rather, perhaps I didn't take part in themselves in those competitions myself. So fast forward, first year of college, I realized that I have to do something with my life. I have to make something off of it. And so I'm browsing through LinkedIn this one fine morning and I come across this post. I think it was by this organization called the Vinod Kothari Consultants. And they had a research writing competition on structured finance. And the winners were to be given a good sum of money and were to be invited to Mumbai for a conference and present their paper over there. So I looked at that and I wondered whether I can take this opportunity and perhaps make something off of it. Now, full disclosure, I didn't understand what finance meant. Needless to say, what structured finance meant. I
Mm.
didn't understand how information asymmetry works, how markets work, nothing. I don't understand the research question as a whole. And I have 4 days to write something and make something. And the call for papers is out since 3 months. So the odds are clearly not in my favor. So I wonder what harm could it be? What if I just start reading up on this? If I find this interesting, might as well write something. So I started reading things about finance. I read a couple of finance books. I read about structured finance. I understood how it works. And moreover, I used a lot of ChatGPT to understand the concept. I would just simply ask it to teach it to me like it would teach it to a 7-year-old. And it would simplify it on a very rudimentary level. And I could understand things in a manner that I wasn't able to understand by reading academic articles. So AI, in effect, made it very easy for me to understand and grasp concepts. And then after, let's say, 3 days or 2 days of reading about it profusely, I wrote something for them and I submitted the paper to them. And turns out I actually won the competition and I was invited
Wow.
in to present the paper. And I think that was the beginning of me understanding that, oh, maybe I am good at research scholarship and I'm good at writing. I pursued that, and then later I was sitting at my internship in Delhi, and came across this another call for papers. It was for the Global FinTech Fest, and the call for papers was completely technical in nature. There was no legalese in it. It was completely financial technology, which again I don't know anything of because I'm a law student. But I figure I have a month. Let's just read up on this. Let's just see if I can understand it, and perhaps produce something, um, which I mean what if I win, right? There's always that 1% chance. So I attempt the Global FinTech Award, and turns out I won that also. I got a second position, and the first position was won by some PhD professor. And the third was also a PhD scholar. I was the youngest winner for the Global FinTech conference. And I realized that I didn't know finance, I didn't know technology, but the fact that we have AI now, the fact that we have YouTube now, the fact that we have things like Z Library or LibGen, we have very easy access to resources, to understanding concepts, to understanding subject areas like we never did before in history. And if we can utilize that and perhaps produce something that is unique, because I think what young scholars have that perhaps older scholars don't really have is the ability and the courage to be extremely controversial in their papers or to have radical ideas. So if you are, let's say, a very erudite scholar, you will not venture into taking a very clear stance or very clear position, which is perhaps controversial or may perhaps drag your name through the mud, or you may be criticized for it. People tend not to do that. I've been advised by my professors to not write controversially. But as young scholars, we have no name to lose. We have nothing to lose. We have no name in the industry, right? If we are criticized, if we are sort of criticized for our work or our ideas, or if we're just blatantly wrong, so be it. We'll be criticized. We'll write something again. Big deal. So I think what young scholars have to offer, that older scholars don't have to offer, is the courage to be controversial. And I think that is exactly what helps me accomplish my goals or accomplish or get awards. I write extremely radically and controversially. I'm not afraid of taking positions against the status quo. And that is a trait that young scholars have that older scholars don't, because they tend to be very attuned towards the status quo. Some minor changes they will comment upon, but they don't argue for radical changes, which is rather unfortunate. So that is briefly what my journey is and the discovery of
Okay.
what I can. Yeah.
Aditya, could you share a particularly successful, by your definition, example of your radical thinking?
Okay. So a particularly successful, let's see. So I would say to start out with, for the Global FinTech Award, um, I don't want to go to the nitty-gritties of the subject matter because it's a little complicated. However, what I argued was that we have a way of looking at artificial intelligence or technology where we assume that humans might be replaced by technology because it is so correct almost always all the time. what we fail to understand with those technologies is that some of them, like let's say neural networks or deep learning models, they become so complicated in their operations that even the physicists who design them don't quite understand how they arrived at the outcome. Now we can see the outcome, what the outcome is, but we can't infer causality. We can't understand how it arrived at the outcome. And these are called black box models.
Yes.
Now, what I argued in my paper was that we are currently being ruled by these black box models, as Frank Pascal also argued. And
Yeah.
then perhaps the more radical thought was that I gave them a taxonomical classification of different kinds of technology, starting from machine learning models with simple regression and aggregation. Then comes deep learning, then comes neural networks. And so you technologies moves in complexity, which is what I argued, that they move in complexity. And because they move in complexity, you have to distinguish first how complicated the technology is. If it is a neural network, if it is a deep learning model which you can't reason with or can't understand causality, then I was arguing that you do not use those in financial markets or those which directly impact the rights of creditors. So, for example, if I give you a very simple example, there was a recidivism prediction algorithm in the US, which was employed by prisons, which would predict whether prisoners were to commit crime again if they were given parole, and that
Yes.
is how they were given parole using the algorithm. Now,
Yes.
ultimately, what the finding was with that algorithm is it was discriminating between black prisoners and white prisoners because
Yes.
black prisoners had historically committed more crime.
Right.
You see, and because they had historically committed more crime, and the data that AI uses
Yeah.
is historical ultimately, it was using that to discriminate.
Yeah.
Now, the formalistic methodology of computation, which was regression, that is in effect, that is essentially not discriminatory. But you see how those outcomes became discriminatory. Now, the problem is that we were able to find that out because we could infer causality because it was a simple machine learning model. However, if it was a deep learning model, if it was a neural networking model, then you can't understand where the discrimination lies. You can only see the outcome. And perhaps the outcome may also become so extremely nuanced that you may not be able to see discrimination. So, for example, what is happening today is what I argued in the paper was we have these algorithms used by uh, credit rating agencies, which rate your
Yeah.
credit in terms of whether you how likely are you to default. And
Yeah.
for that, for those CIBIL scores, they take in data from everything from what time do you eat, what is your preferred food options, what do you watch when you're scrolling through Facebook or YouTube. Every single parameter is taken into account. Now, what I posited was, what if one of those parameters is your caste
Yes.
or is, let's say, the color of your skin? Because it is a truism that historically certain castes have committed more default. Now, the reason for that is we both know that because they have been historically oppressed or marginalized. But the AI program does not know that. It will simply see that this particular caste has committed more default in the past. And therefore, it will use that parameter amongst thousands others to give them an unfavorable rating. Right. So broadly, this was how I sort of critiqued the entire artificial intelligence system that we're using in financial markets, where the entire discourse is going towards, oh, you have to innovate, you have to automate, you have to use AI, you have to use machine learning. Uh, OpenAI is doing such amazing things. But I come and say, okay, how about you take a step back and how about you stop and think about what are the consequences of what you're doing and what impact will it have on financial markets or industry. So I think
Okay,
that
Aditya,
was,
can I jump in at this point?
yeah,
I think by now it is well known that past discrimination is baked into historical data.
right.
Okay, this is what the two examples you are giving are of that. And I think it's well known that past discrimination, the past data are not clean,
100%.
they're tainted. And if you're going to use those data to generate any new results, then those new results, even if your methodology is not discriminatory, but the core of your data is based on past discrimination, then you are going to get discriminatory result and an invalid result. I think it's well known. I'm slightly involved in such
It is
activities
well.
at this point that look, the past data are tainted, in short,
Right,
right?
right,
They are tainted. This is not a word that is commonly used, but this is a word that I use. Listen, data are tainted. They don't worship the data because you are not getting the picture that you are supposed to get from the data. And unless you undiscriminate the past data,
right,
you cannot predict in the non-discriminatory world of the future if that's where you are headed. If it's going to remain, if those discriminations are going to remain, then past discrimination is a relevant factor.
right, right,
But if they are not going to remain, if you want to get rid of them, then you are lost. Okay, sorry to say this, but I'm sort of involved in an economic legal work these days, not sort of, actually quite a bit. And
right,
we do talk about, we do actually have to get around this data problem.
right, right.
Whether it
But
is big machine or artificial or AI or small sample, the problem is that the past data are not clean, they're tainted,
right, right.
right?
But
Okay.
I just want to add to that. I'm sorry
Yeah.
for asking you
No,
the
good,
question.
ask.
I'm just very curious since you've worked in the industry before. One, I think the problem is again, literature exists, but the problem remains compounded if you are using a black box. So if it's a black box, then you can't even understand whether the data is tainted because you can't see how the data is being computed. And secondly, okay, so what do you think? What solutions could we sort of use for that? Because AI is we have to use AI. It's the future now. But
Yeah,
how do you solve the problem of
okay.
expired data sets?
I don't know enough about large learning models or deep learning models or AI to be able to give you any answer. But what I can say is that it's a tough problem. Even facing the work, even doing the work without all of the complications of black box models, where you can't see the flow of causality. And by the way, in economics, we call those as reduced form models. So it's not unusual for us to think about those. What you're asking for is a structural model in which you lay out the causality flows. But it is not an easy matter. Okay, because even when you know how the causality is flowing, the question is that causality was true in the past. How do you undo it when you are actually looking at a particular case in today? Okay, it's not an easy matter, and we are grappling with it. Let's put it this way.
Okay.
Okay, we're grappling with it without the complexity of the uh, unknowns in the deep models or whatever. Even in simple models, we are grappling with it. Okay? So I don't have any answer except that it's hard to come up with an alternative.
Right. Right. I agree with that completely. Also, I think on the topic of AI, how I personally think AI is impacting young students is that it has completely reshaped how education works today. I would even go so far as to say that the purpose of university or the purpose of school or the purpose of being taught by professors, I won't say professors, but teachers in school would become secondary because today most of the education is extremely democratized. So, for instance, if I have to, is if as a 21-year-old in today's age, if I have to understand a certain concept, let's say if I have to understand structured finance, I would do two things. I would go to YouTube. I would understand the very basics of it by watching a visual video, which has animations, which has one of the world's best professor explaining to me how it works. If I don't understand something still, I could simply go on ChatGPT, I could go on Bard and ask it questions, ask it to simplify me, ask it to teach it to me in thousands of different ways. Then, if I am at the point where I would want to indulge in stringent academic research, I would simply go to, let's say, LibGen or ZLibrary or Google Scholar or Road or DOAS and look up, let's say, research papers, articles, and the open access repository today is um, quite quite huge. And I would even go so far as to say that for papers which are not open access, you have LibGen. Now, I'm not going to question the ethics of using LibGen because that's beyond, I can't comment on that. But I think how education is functioning today with technological advancement has been completely reshaped. How I perceive education, how I perceive research, writing, scholarship is completely rebranded. And I think, moreover, that this artificial boundaries we've drawn by using concepts such as degrees, like you have BTech, BEd, bachelor's in economics, master's in economics, um, are would ultimately become redundant because there would ultimately be an interdisciplinary flow between different subject areas. So, for instance, if I am working in the discipline of law, I have to confront the problems that technology poses on legal scholarship. If somebody is confront if is working in economics, they have to confront the problems in algorithmic economy. If somebody is working in literature or English or sociological studies, right, they have to look at how equality and discrimination would be affected in the technological age. So technology would ultimately bind all of these silos of disciplines we've created and ultimately make students which are educated, I wouldn't say specialized, but they have a certain knowledge system which they can access. And that is not, I would say, restricted by its specialization. So this entire specialized economy that industrialization created, I would think in the future that technology and AI would bind all of it again tomorrow. And perhaps you'll have students who, although are specialized in a certain field, however, possess an interdisciplinary knowledge which is crucial to understand the problems that we have tomorrow. So I think a revolution in education and understanding of subject areas and scholarship that is quite on us now.
And how do you aim to achieve this? Or do
It's
you
quite.
aim to achieve it?
I would even argue it's we have already achieved it. We're
Okay.
already there. If you look at how college students study, those who do study, that is, or those who pursue scholarship, they're not going to their professors and asking them for, let's say, certain paper recommendations or looking at because academic discourses was an exclusive discipline where it was restricted towards outside members by either exclusivity of language or by conferences. The invitations were sent to a select few. That is not happening today. The information is not flowing in a top-down manner where the professors are your first source of information. For me, my first source of information about any subject area is not going to my professor and asking them for notes or information. I know that the internet has more to offer than any single human being could ever, or any conference could ever offer me. So even if I don't go to the world's best institute in the world, I'm not from Harvard, I don't have access to Stanford's conferences, I have access to YouTube. And nothing can beat the sort of content or educative content in YouTube or in ChatGPT or Bard or LibGen for that matter. Nothing at all. And that is already my first preference. That is how I am indulging in scholarship or producing scholarship, and that is for most young scholars now. It's completely changed how humans educate themselves, and their first preference is no longer universities. Their first preference to upskill themselves is no longer universities or even the school boards. It is the internet and the internet only. And now and now AI integration with internet has made that even more easier for us to do. It is not very hard for me to understand complicated concepts like underfitting or overfitting. I could just ask ChatGPT what it is, explain to me in simpler terms, and then perhaps move from one step to the other to perhaps academic pieces once I've understood the foundations of it on YouTube or ChatGPT. So I think the revolution has already happened. It's just the society is refusing to update itself. It's refusing to acknowledge because they want to keep up with institutions. Harvard has a certain legacy. Indian schools have a certain legacy, but I don't think this institutional approach where you have certain select few institutions like, let's say, IIT Bombay or Harvard or Stanford, and they're the ones producing excellent researchers or scholars or employable people, will no longer exist. Education of tomorrow is democratized, is completely on the fingertips or your palm tips in your phone screens or laptop screens, and it's out there for you to reach for practically free of cost. So I don't think the whole
Okay.
argument.
All right.
Yeah.
It's a very powerful message that you have. Obviously, very passionate about it. Anything else you want to add here?
No, I think that's just about it. I would again, I would just ask every single young scholar or anybody who's interested in scholarship or research or any subject area for that matter, just to be curious about things. And if you want to learn about something, do not shy away from it because your discipline precludes you from understanding that subject. The boundaries, the artificial boundaries that degrees create, no longer persist. They have been deconstructed by internet, by YouTube, by ChatGPT, by AI, all of these things. So go on, explore fields that are not within your degree or within your expertise, and the resources are out there for you to get. It's on your palm tips, it's on a laptop screen. So yes, I would just encourage
Okay.
people to.
Well, that's a wonderful message, and you're very much like the face of the new India. The person who is with it, is with the technology, and has reached certain conclusions, not afraid to say what they are, right or wrong, doesn't matter. The conclusions are my conclusions, and I'm going with them. So good, and hope you succeed. I think you are on the right track in many ways. Um, Technology has changed teaching. From my personal example, I first taught at the university from 1980 to 88. There was no internet at that time. Okay. Well, let's say there was no World Wide Web. There was an internet, okay, but people don't think of the difference between the two. But what you are calling the internet is technically the World Wide Web. Okay, but so nobody could have any information except from me. I did go back to teach in 2005, and at that time, the information was with the students. They had laptops, and I could even say, "Hey, can you look it up?" I could say to them, "Hey, just look it up. I forget what the number is for 1984. Can you please look it up and tell us?" So the information had already shifted from me to the students via the internet, the web, which was very, very, very tiny at that time. By the time I finished teaching in 2015, the internet or the web was everywhere. But we don't have ChatGPT and AI. And of course, now that is also, so information is no longer needed to be taught in the universities or colleges. But how to think, that remains an open question. Okay.
Correct.
All right. So you can think about that for some time. That, okay, does YouTube teach you how to think? Does AI teach you how to think logically? How to derive conclusions? Or is it just providing you with the inputs you need to base your thinking on?
That's
So
interesting. I
the,
think that is
so, in
very.
fact, I had a talk with the dean of a law college in India, in a Vidped, and he asked me, "What do you think?" I said, "Sir, in 1980s, we were the repositories of information. Okay. Later on in 2000s, we were simply saying, look at this place. This is how you find information. Right? Now, we are no longer in the role of information people. The information is out there. It can be done better than I can do because you can just ask ChatGPT or somebody else, and you will get the information. How to use that information, how to think about it, how to put your mind to it. And now the burden is actually higher because you have to collate now. As I mean, what you're saying is the silos were there, but thank God, now the silos are there. So you have to now think about it from various perspectives: legal, financial, social, all of it at the same time. How to put it together, how to think it through. That is for the scholarly type people, that is the job. Information is there, right?
Correct. I think I agree with
But
that completely.
how to integrate, how to find it's actually a tougher job, because in the old days it was enough to know, hey, I remember the capital of Kenya. Wonderful, I'm a great guy. Right? Or maybe I remember how many meters above sea level Nairobi is. I'm so great, I know it. Okay. Ask me any capital, I'll tell you how many meters above sea level is. I'm fantastic. Today, none of that. Okay. Now you have to ask, what exactly is that altitude doing to the social and economic life? So, well, ChatGPT will tell me that. I said, okay, fine. Then the ChatGPT will tell you. Then you say, but how do you use it to design future initiatives? ChatGPT will not tell you that, I think. Maybe it will. Okay, so let's end it here. Thank you so much for a very informative and provocative discussion. It has certainly been very good. So let's end it here. And I'll be back with another young person or an expert soon. Bye till then, everybody. Bye.